All right, Steve Bannon, former Trump advisor, all-around anti-globalist, pro-capitalist, put some order in the world, restore Christian foundation, all of it. Steve, welcome. How are you?
Thanks, Michael. Thanks for having me on the show.
Oh, well, thank you very much for coming on. First question for you is specifically, you are making a great amount of waves with War Room. You started off with the impeachment, you moved on to the pandemic. My question is, when you're talking about war, what exactly is the war, and ultimately, is it a spiritual war?
It's 100% a spiritual war. I mean, this is why this great conflict with the Chinese Communist Party. Remember, they are an atheistic, materialistic dictatorship that has crushed the spirit of the Chinese people. They're the number one enemy to the Chinese people. And this is really, I think, in high relief. It's the underpinnings of the Judeo-Christian West and what we stand for at its deepest level versus the Chinese Communist Party. Matt Pottinger, who's deputy national security advisor, gave this magnificent speech at University of Virginia on May 4th that tied together the deep underlying spiritual values of the Judeo-Christian West with the underlying philosophy of ancient Chinese thought. And how that really is what the Chinese people stand for, not this materialistic atheism. Look, taking down the Chinese Communist Party is the unfinished work of the 20th century, right? We're going to not have a short 20th century. It's not 1914 to 1989.
Right.
It's actually going to go into the 21st century. This is a war for eternity, and that's why we've got to gird ourselves. We have to get focused, and we have to win.
All right, and so let's get into some detail here. You had you're in the process of working through the restoration of the Judeo-Christian culture and civilization, really. I mean, that's what it is. It's the civilization. With your work at the Tresulti, the abbey in Italy, which started off great, then hit a big legal snag, and then you just won that, so good news there. You got the clearance to go, and then what was it, the next day? The Italian leftist government came around and said, well, we couldn't get you civilly, so now we're going to go after you criminally. What's going on there? I mean, first of all, give everybody a little update on just what is Tresulti, what's going on technically and officially, and then what's the bigger picture with it?
Tresulti is a monastery built about 900 years ago, and it's one of the foundation. It's right up about 40 or 50 miles north of Monte Cassino. It's in those great monasteries that really Christian civilization and Christian culture was able to go through the Dark Ages and bring really the Renaissance thinking and really the transition from ancient society to us in ancient Christian teachings. So it's vital. And what happened is the Italian government has just run out of money to kind of keep these things going. So they had an auction for people to come in and kind of take them and put them to good use. We won that tender. There was no cover bid. We won the tender. We committed to put capital. And ever since then, the leftist, the progressive left and the secular left and the atheistic left in Italy has been trying to stop us from doing it. It's been very easy for me to walk away. We've piled a lot of money into the legal aspects, and we've put a lot of money into actually getting the monastery up to speed for this. We call it a gladiator school. What we're trying to do is a school that teaches the underpinnings of the Judeo-Christian West, but how to apply that in a modern world, and particularly, as you know, Michael, in the modern media context, and how you have to, no matter what your profession, you have to be kind of focused and almost like an armor-piercing shell, and that's what we intend to do. It drives the left nuts,
yeah.
And I'm glad it does. We could have walked away from this. In fact, many people said, hey, you could put this school anywhere and do it anywhere. We're actually launching a distance learning operation in conjunction with a Catholic college that we'll announce here in the coming weeks. But I thought about this, particularly with the pandemic. It's more important than ever that Catholics have a commitment to Italy, that Catholics have a commitment to Rome, that Catholics have a commitment to keep that civilization vibrant and robust. And so we've doubled down. And like I tell them, they can come after us on any charges they want. We're going to prevail in this. Okay, and we are now, this school, we've gotten so much interest around the world. In fact, this is the great thing that the progressive left has done. They have been so triggered by this that they've made this kind of an international story, and we are inundated with people, and we're going to take people from different societies, different cultures, obviously different ethnicities, from India, the Middle East, Japan, China, all over to participate in this program.
Do you think there is they've made this such a set-piece battle? It's kind of like, it's sort of your line in the sand and saying, nope, you shall not pass. We are going to go here. And so I would anticipate that you would anticipate they're just going to keep trying to paper you to death in courts and laws and all sorts of things.
For your audience, and look, your audience would get this better than most. I mean, we're entering a new dark age as far as spirituality goes. And just like the last dark age, you need nodes of light. You need nodes of where people really come concentrated. It's what Pope Benedict said when he first got it. I'd rather have a smaller, more concentrated, more lived Catholicism and lived Christianity, right? So what we're trying to do, and Marcel Le Pen in France has done this. She started her own school. Some other schools are popping up throughout Europe that you're seeing this done. We're trying to do it in our own way with kind of an international cast of teachers, but we're not going to back off this. This is absolutely essential, and this is why they've made such a big deal about it. Right. This is why they're taking us to court. This is why now Ben Harnwell, who's one of the nicest, most decent guys in the world,
yes, he is.
They're bringing him up on criminal charges. When we did the special about the Vatican with Richard Engel, which was supposed to be about the monastery, they got you and they're attacking you. So my point is they're so triggered. And why are they triggered? They understand that we need these type of entities in order to see through this dark age. And that's why I'm very proud just to be a small part of it. But we're going to prevail in this, and it's going to be a center that we can hope to bring people together, and particularly young people together, to get ready and get focused on the great struggle ahead.
Is that the work of God you're talking about?
Look, God works through, you see this in the New Testaments with the Holy Spirit, right? I mean, how many times in the Gospel of Mark is the Holy Spirit coming through Christ and to heal the sick and to heal the blind, right? One of the things President Trump says is nothing's inevitable. And what that means is that through human agency and human action, we're just all instruments, right? Burke said we have as much obligation to the people that came before us as we do the generations come ahead of us, the children and grandchildren. We have a responsibility to all of those people that bequeath the Judeo-Christian West to us in that monastery, in these institutions. That's the obligation. What Burke was saying, and really what Trump's saying, is that we're an agent on earth for a certain period of time. And what you've got to be is an instrument. You've got to be an instrument of divine providence. And look, I'm the most imperfect instrument in the world. Trust me.
Maybe second.
I've told myself that when I leave this mortal coil, I'm going to be able to sit in judgment and say, hey, I left it all on the field.
Yes.
I'm terribly imperfect, but I'm going to leave it all on the field. And I don't care how hard they come. I don't care what they say. I don't care what they attack. That just makes us stronger. And I think that's one of the things they're trying to do at the school. And you can see how triggered they are. Listen, what they don't want Christians, and they don't want really people of any spiritual values fighting back. This is, you see, in the Chinese Communist Party. It's one of the reasons I'm so outraged at the Vatican for what they've done to prop up this atheistic, materialistic, because we have a show that has Chinese voices every week. If you heard these people who are Christians, Catholics, Buddhists, Muslims, and say this regime is there to strip all that out of you and just make you an automaton, just to make you a robot, that the only thing in life is this crass materialism, and you have no afterlife, and you have no spiritual values. That's what this war is. This war, yes, we're going to fight it on many different fronts. We're going to fight it with many different weapons. We're going to fight, financially and technology and politically, and in the United States one day, and Europe the next, and India on the border up there with the troops, the South China Sea. But it's far deeper than that. This is spiritual warfare, and that's why they're so triggered by the monastery at Tresulti.
Sure. Let me ask you, if we can, about globalism. And people hear that term, and it probably means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, but it really is the 21st century attack against all things spiritual. You have all these different movements throughout history. This is the latest one, and I'm not sure a lot of people, even Catholics, quite get the various little foxholes on this battlefield of immigration and so-called man-made climate change and helping the poor, the social justice warrior stuff. It's all interconnected and it's all driven by the globalists. But first of all, what is globalism? And then can you connect all of those smaller dots for us?
Yeah. Globalism is what it's trying to do is trying to destroy the nation state as a unit of governance, right? And people have the highest opportunity to really be free men and free women when you have the entity of the nation state. We've had this system called the Westphalian system since the end of the religious wars back in 1350, around then. And so you've had this system, the Westphalian system. This is what Donald Trump was talking about on his first inaugural address. It's that system. And you can be allied with people. It doesn't mean you're isolationist. It doesn't mean you just think of your own country and that's everything, nothing else. You absolutely are part of a world community, interconnected,
Sure.
right? We're interconnected as Catholics. But you do it within the structure, the political structure of the nation state, because that's where the little guy has the most control. Remember, one of the tenets of Catholicism is subsidiarity. We try to push these things down to the lowest level possible, and that's where the nation state can embody where free men and free women are. The globalist movement is completely secular, right? It doesn't want to get rid of the nation state. It wants to turn us into a network effect, and that's kind of what the Chinese model is, this totalitarian atheistic model where China is going to be the center of advanced manufacturing. One belt, one road, made in China 2025, and the rollout of Huawei, which is quantum computing, converges to make China basically with slave labor, the Chinese people, right, who don't have their freedom and no access to spirituality. That's what they're kind of crushed. That network's effect. Everybody else is a tributary state.
Right.
Everybody is a market for the Chinese. We're producers of raw material. This is why they want our pigs, they want our hogs, they want our soybeans, they want our wheat. But they ship us $600 billion a year of advanced manufacturing goods. This is one of the reasons I think we have these riots today, is that you see the difference between at Cape Kennedy yesterday with the advanced rocket and the fourth industrial revolution, which we should be the leaders of, versus this kind of racial animosity and class struggle on the street, because all the manufacturing jobs have been stripped out and sent to China. The globalists want the cheapest labor possible, and they don't care if they use slave labor. That's why this system cannot continue on. That's why the elites, the party at Davos, have benefited. They've benefited the most. The top 1% have, the Soros types have consolidated all the wealth and political power. And what you see, populism in Europe or Brazil, or nationalism in India or in Japan or the United States. These are people pushing back. And right now it's on a spectrum. You do have left populists and you have right populists. Hopefully we'll be able to come together and put our differences aside. One of the things, the left populism, it's a little too secular, right? Yeah. So we got to, I think, imbue the spiritual values here. People should understand, though, particularly your audience, this is a great spiritual struggle. So every day you got to reinforce yourself to say, hey, look, if I can only help move the football some way down the road, right, I'll pass the baton at some point to another generation. And that's what we're trying to do both at Trasulti, at the War Room. It's really what all my work is involved with one way or the other, is to push the ball forward for populism, for nationalism, and to make sure people have access to spiritual values and are not basically condemned, stripped down, defeated by this communistic, atheistic materialism.
We refer here at Church Militant, when we're doing various stories or I'm doing a vortex or something, we just call it the Marxist left. And it's present, obviously, in the culture, every institution that you can name, every cultural institution. But perhaps most disturbingly for Catholics, I'd like you to share your thoughts on, do you think, and to what degree has the Marxist left actually infiltrated the church itself, especially at the Vatican? And I think it's important to note for many people who, they just haven't seen all of these connections until recently, that the pontificate of Pope Francis has certainly accelerated some of this and kind of brought it out into the open. But you can't say it began with him, because this has been decades in the making. It's been the softening up, the tilling of the ground of faithful Catholics, where they just don't know the faith anymore. They disagree with all the church's teachings. That's how you destroy a culture, is by destroying that moral, spiritual fabric of it. So what's going on at the Vatican?
Let me leave the theological questions aside, although you have the questions of the dubia. I think it's, 1,500 days since that's been put forward to him. He hasn't answered. You've got these 20 great theologians led by the first, I think, Catholic head of theology at Cambridge University since the Reformation, that have come out, and they've questioned him on a whole other list of potential heresies. Right. So the great doctors and thinkers of the church, I think, have put the Pope on notice that many of his teachings are heretical. He has yet to answer any of that. That's not, that's not my line of work. That's for others. But I'm always impressed that so many sincere and top-level theologians continually call the Pope out, and he refuses to answer, which is pretty extraordinary, that arrogance. But let's go back. Remember, the Soviet Union, the Russians understood, like the Nazis understood, but the Russians understood particularly, to defeat the West, they had to defeat the Catholic Church. They were, and also Christianity, but they were most focused on the Catholic Church, particularly given its strength in Russia, given its strength in Eastern Europe, given its strength in Western Europe at the time. They were going to infiltrate the monasteries, infiltrate the seminaries. They wanted to infiltrate the church, and that was an ongoing program for many, many years, many, many decades. What you also saw was quite interesting in the 70s. You had this concept come up that the great centers of learning in the church, Paris and these other places, thought was too ridiculous. It's liberation theology.
Right.
And this was essentially Marxism as imbued into the Gospels. It really took the Gospel of Matthew and some of the other Gospels and had this kind of thing called liberation theology, which was just Marxism, the Marxist social justice program, with a patina of the Gospels on top of it. The great centers of learning in the church dismissed this as ridiculous. It kind of ended up in Central America and Latin America by the Jesuits. Yes. The Jesuits brought it there, and it was a continuous sideshow. But remember, when Pope John Paul II went to Central America during the Reagan administration, remember, it was Reagan, Thatcher, and the Pope that helped bring down the Soviet Union, and they did bring it down in about 10 years when they started working together. They had that radical Jesuit that tried to kiss the Pope's ring. He got him up and read him the riot act right on the tarmac.
That's right.
Right on the tarmac. This was a fight inside the church. But remember, at the time, it was dismissed as kind of these radical Jesuits in Latin America and Central America. Well, guess what? This is what Pope Francis came out of. He's a liberation theologian Jesuit that came from Latin America. And I can tell you right now, inside the Vatican, and you can see this by exposés of people who are not good people. Look, Dr. Francis Martel, who's not a great guy. Okay, yeah. This is a bad dude. But he wrote a book that every Catholic should read in the closet of the Vatican. It is shocking. You cannot get through 2 or 3 pages that you have to go say a novena and you have to take a hot shower. But it's in your face of the debauchery, the vice, the corruption, and the incompetence that goes around into the Vatican today. Okay, there is a very dark force that is flowing through there, and that's got to be confronted. What the theologians do, the theologians do. But listen, I went back for the big conference on pedophilia. And at that time, they were running this deal about a secret deal with the Chinese Communist Party that they would not open up on to really crush Cardinal Zen and all the underground Catholics in China, who is one of the most vibrant, robust parts of the church that we have. These people have been under tremendous pressure for 50, 60, 70 years. Yeah. The Vatican, at the same time, they're having this seminar on this conference on pedophilia, of which they walked away from basically any responsibility cleaning it up. My point, I was saying at the time, I said, look, unless we get our hands around what's going on, the financial assets of the church are going to be collapsed. Yeah. That the administrative side of the church is so botched this in Western Europe and in North America that you're going to have these massive lawsuits. And essentially, back to Burke's theorem, all these institutions, these churches, this real estate, but really the church is a vibrant institution, is going to come under assault by trial lawyers and actually attorney generals who are just doing their job. I said, and that conference was, to me, a disaster. It showed you the incompetence and corruption of the Vatican not to want to take any responsibility for what's going on. You can't run away from this. At the same time, the most robust church, part of the church we have, the innocent Chinese, under Cardinal Zen, they sold them out. And why do they keep it secret? The Vatican's a signatory to all the UN things. You're not supposed to have any secret deals. Remember, one of the reasons World War II exploded into a global conflagration were secret deals everybody had. Yep. The United States never declared war on Nazi Germany. We got hit by Pearl Harbor. 2 days later, the Nazis declared war on us because guess what? They had a secret deal with the Japanese to attack America. These secret deals have been outlawed. Why is the deal with the Vatican? I said at that time, I went on the convent across the street and gave a global broadcast through the firewall to the Chinese people. Yeah. This deal must be made public. The Catholic Church needs to understand, the people that are in the pews every week need to understand what exactly the Vatican's done with a godless, atheistic, mercantilist dictatorship, totally materialistic of the Chinese Communist Party, to torture not just the Catholic Church, the 100 million underground house Christians, the Tibetan Buddhists, the Muslim Uyghurs. Remember, they won't tolerate any spiritual entity whatsoever. They particularly want to destroy the Catholic Church. Look, In this world, I've had the great opportunity as a working class kid from Richmond to see many of the power brokers in the world. Okay, Cardinal Zen in Hong Kong is the holiest person I've ever met. You go around Cardinal Zen and you feel an aura around him. An aura, I will tell you, that I've never seen in any person in the Vatican. Okay? Cardinal Zen is the embodiment of what Catholicism is. He has worked for decades and decades and decades for the Catholics in Hong Kong, in mainland China. He has condemned the foreign minister of the Vatican. He is basically condemned to the degree that he can as a cardinal, Pope Francis, for doing this. Look, here's what you're going to see when that deal is put on the table. That the Vatican has looked at and gone forward to try to get recognition of the Chinese Communist Party. Okay, and that's going to sell out Christians in Taiwan, Christians throughout the rest of East Asia. This is unacceptable. The Vatican, on an administrative basis, leave the theology aside to the theologians to hold them to account. But from the administrative aspect, which every layman out there has a right to question, they are incompetent, they're corrupt, it's debauchery, that the money that's supposed to go to move Christ's mission on earth is just being just thrown away. You might as well burn it in your front yard. They have to be held accountable for what they've done. And I think we need a major move of reform of the Vatican. Okay? And they're not going to run and hide in there. If we don't have this, right now you have satanic powers that have gotten inside there. And you can look at any book you want to look. There's many books out there today. There's a lot of information out there about this. As a practicing Catholic, when you give your money to the bishop and it goes up to the Vatican, you got to sit there and go, hang on for a second. I'm essentially a shareholder here. We got to have some accountability. And that accountability has to be just as tough as the nuns used to be for you when you were in grammar school. We need this accountability now. No, Sister Catherine, I had a nun in the 3rd grade. We had 68 kids in the class. I went to Harvard and Georgetown later. It's the best education I had was my 3rd grade. You know why? There was no games with Sister Catherine. You were totally accountable for your actions, young man. And she made sure, because I was like not one of the highly disciplined ones. She got my attention. We need Sister Catherine's discipline. We need her strength. And we particularly need her accountability today in this church.
Absolutely. I had a 3rd grade, it was Sister Bernadette for me, and exact same story. She forced me to get straight A's. First time I got straight A's. So yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. I'm sure many of our audience do as well. Let's shift topic real quickly, specifically to something you know nothing about, politics. What is the, why do politics matter so much? And how important in this coming election, the 2020, is the Catholic vote?
President, look, right now, you know, there's a poll out today. We're talking on Sunday, the 31st of May. There's a poll out today, a Wall Street Journal, I think NBC poll, that shows President Trump down 10 points among registered voters to Biden. It shows President Trump at 43%, and that range you're starting to see in these polls of 39 to 43%. I think this election is going to be the exact same replay of 2016. The American people do not want the managed decline of their country, and particularly working class and lower middle class people refuse to accept this. They understand they've been bequeathed something that is quite precious. And that is the greatest republic in mankind's history and the greatest country in mankind's history. We're providential. We are the New Jerusalem. It is incumbent upon all of us to work to save that and to move it on at a better level than what we bequeath it. That is what this election is going to come down to, is who is the best person to do that. And look, as imperfect as you and I are, Donald Trump understands he's an imperfect instrument also. But I will tell you, given the fact of how far we were behind in mid-August when I stepped in there, it was providential that Donald Trump was elected president of the United States. Yeah. And I think this time you're going to see the exact same issues. It's the signal and the noise. Forget all the noise and focus on the signal. The signal is quite simply, what type of country are we and what type of country are we going to be? Right now, this aspect about confronting and defeating the Chinese Communist Party is even higher than an economic imperative. Certainly we have to bring those jobs back to be able to have an advanced fourth industrial revolution manufacturing society like you saw on Saturday from Cape Kennedy with the great with Kennedy Space Center at the great launching of the SpaceX missile. Okay? But however, we have a moral imperative. It is our responsibility to work to get a government that will absolutely confront this evil that's coming out of Beijing, that looks to enslave not only the Chinese people. You saw what they did on the pandemic, right? And they forget whether it's a biological weapon or it came out of the lab. That'll all be proven over time. We know that when they knew they had this, they lied to the World Health Organization. They lied to the Taiwanese CDC. They lied to everybody. They lied to President Trump, and they exacerbated its flow with innocent Chinese people throughout the world. Every dead person in the United States throughout the world, the blood's on the hands of the CCP in Beijing. We're at an inflection point in world history, and right now, for what they're doing to Hong Kong, and remember, in Hong Kong, the reason Hong Kong's fighting for their freedom, most of those kids are Christians or Catholics.
Yes.
These are young people that want spiritual values. They're not materialistic automatons. They're like the patriots of 1775. That's what they're fighting for. We're in 1938. Unless we stand up to this dictatorship right now, we're inexorably going to be drawn into a shooting war, a kinetic war, either in the South China Sea to protect Taiwan, South Korea, and Japan, or on the border of India to protect or work with our great ally in India as the Chinese amass 10,000 combat troops up there. Trust me, we either stop, this is Czechoslovakia all over again. Yeah. We either stop them now, and President Trump in the Rose Garden the other day told you he's not going to be Neville Chamberlain, he's going to be Winston Churchill. My only point is we don't need to study it anymore, we don't need to review it anymore. Donald Trump's the hammer, American capital and American technology's the anvil. We got to drop the hammer on the anvil. We got to move off today. And people have to understand this is not going to be easy. We've allowed ourselves this managed decline by the secular establishment. Mm-hmm. The establishment. Remember, why did the elites in this country agree to a managed decline? You know why? They lost contact and belief and faith in the underlying tenets of the Judeo-Christian West. Right. Once they lost that, they were just trying to cut the best deal possible. They cut it with the rising China. What we have to do, working class people, this fall, from Wisconsin to Michigan to Pennsylvania, and the Catholic vote's essential to that. Remember, the Catholic vote, the Polish vote, all those aspects of the Catholic vote, from Ohio to Wisconsin to Michigan to Pennsylvania, it's going to be gut check time. Do I believe all the happy talk coming from the left? Or do I go back to core values, right? Even if, remember, Donald Trump won because of working class Democrats. I come from a working class Democratic family. My dad and my grandfather was 50 years of lineman for the phone company. My dad was 50 years. They were part of the unionization of the phone company back in the 30s. I come from working class Democrats, many of whom today are huge Trump supporters, right? Yeah. And many of them were Reagan Democrats. So these are working class Democrats that understand the underlying values that President Trump, and I realize, he's imperfect. His Twitter account, upsets you. Some of his actions upset you. But remember, the signal in the noise, that's all the noise. The signal is standing up for America, standing up for American workers, and standing up for the Judeo-Christian West.
Let me wrap up with one final question, if I can, Steve. Can you talk about your thoughts on President Trump's executive order about Section 230 of the Community Decency Act and how he's had it? He's had it with the leftist control of the giant tech, censoring conservatives, religious, whatever. It's just sort of a technical version of what the CCP is doing in China.
Big tech is an absolute threat to the American people, and particularly the American religious community, people that are faith. This big tech, it's too powerful. And remember, it's all made on your money. It's all pension fund. It's pension fund insurance and savings accounts. That's the institutional money that drives big tech. Mm-hmm. Remember, all these guys on Wall Street, it's not their money. They manage the money. They take huge fees off it, and they're very wealthy. It's your money. It's your money that's coming to enslave you. And so, look, I'm a free market capitalist, but this is out of control. Just like the Bell companies back in the 80s. These companies need to be, number one, broken up so they never have this concentration of power again. Number two, they need to be regulated. These are public utilities, and they should be regulated like public utilities. What President Trump has done is a great start. I kind of like what Ted Cruz has done. Ted Cruz sent a letter right after President Trump, and he said in the letter, this is about the sanctions in Iran. And he said, hey, the sanctions go for any goods and services You're providing Twitter, you're providing services. He wants to potentially bring criminal charges. And this is where we ought to get to with the CCP. People that are working to suppress Christians and Catholics, Buddhists, Muslims, Falun Gong, whatever it is, in China with the firewall. The day of just saying, hey, we got to bring the capital back, we got to bring the technology, we now need to start to identify and say, if you continue to do this, right, you're not working for the American people. Peter Thiel, right, who's a very spiritual guy. Peter Thiel, one of the great technology venture capitalists, he said Google was guilty of treason. This is a couple of years ago for their work with the Chinese Communist Party and knowing how involved in the Defense Department they are. We're going to come to a point, and President Trump's, the 230 thing is very big, but I got to tell you, I like where Ted Cruz is going. Ted Cruz is a hammer, and this one's got to be, very focused. Your audience out there, look, you wouldn't exist if you didn't have social media. Remember, President Trump also, to break the back of the mainstream media, to basically to disaggregate them, okay, to go around them. It's the reason your site's so on fire. It's the reason President Trump was able to win the presidency through those tools. They have now had a counter move on that. They're trying to choke it all down. They're trying to get everybody off of social media using artificial intelligence. The American people have to stand up for this. And for the faith community, this is a huge fight. On this front, we must win.
That's absolutely true. Couldn't agree with you more on that, Steve. And since both of us are very involved in that particular world, we have to mind our P's and Q's and be on the offensive on that. Just before we wrap up, anything else I should have asked you? How can people get to you now? Where's War Room? All of that.
Just go to hashtag War Room Pandemic. You can go to @WarRoom2020, @WarRoomPandemic. Go to Citizens of the American Republic. I want to say one last thing. I love you and I love your site. I love what your team's doing. You guys have no back down. No, you don't back down, right? And that's what I love about it. You're fighters. And what we need right now is people not to be passive. We're in a time and place. People say, oh, if I've been around during the Revolution, or if I'd have been around the Civil War, if I'd have been around World War II, well, guess what?
You are.
This is the fourth turning in American history. This is going to be talked about 500 years from now. You know, there's an apocryphal saying that there are decades in which nothing happens, and then there's weeks in which decades happen. That's exactly what we're living through today. That's why people need more access to your site and what your team's saying, Michael, and also to go to the War Room. This is a fight. This is a war. And I got to tell you, it's guys like you and guys like the War Room team. We're not going to back down on this thing like the team in Trizolti. We're in this. Remember, when your time comes to go to the afterlife, to eternal life, you got to be able to sit there and say you left it all on the field. Okay, so through sites like Church Militant and War Room, we hope that it helps you guys do that.
Excellent.
So thanks.
Excellent. And since you named the date of the interview, it is also Pentecost Sunday. So we can certainly look to the Holy Spirit for breathing the new life that we need into us right now, because boy, we really need it.
Thanks, brother.
All right. God bless, Steve. Thanks very much.